bit. Many of you were here. It was really a funny story because for weeks I would sit all the way up here and I could hear this voice. But I'm not a music person, and I know very little about music, and all I can know is I could hear this really good voice. That's all I knew. And I even got up here a couple of weeks and said, somebody can really, really sing, but I don't know who it is, but you need to go see Tucker. Well, Nicole didn't go running up to Tucker, but I put my investigators on the case. And I had some folks that started listening for this voice. And they zeroed it in and zeroed it in, and they found Nicole, and then Tucker went to her. And so, beautiful voice, Nicole. Thank you for singing that. So true. I mean, there's so much symbolism in that song of what we've watched the last several days with the hurricane and waves, right? That he makes us brave. He leads us out to the waters and to the waves. But he's our security in all of that. It isn't that he leads us out there and go, all right, now let me see what you can do. That's how I learned how to swim. Basically, they threw me, just your first visit, I mean, there's a lifeguard there, but they just sort of throw you out there, like, let me see what you can do. And I showed them how I could bob to the bottom of the pool. I was a natural at sinking. And then they try to take you in there, all right, now we're going to teach you how to swim. And then for the final test, they pretty much do the same thing again. They just pretty much throw you in the deep end of the pool and say swim to that end. And if you paid attention in class and did good, you survive, and if not, you got bailed out by a lifeguard. But regardless, we are doing this series called Relationship Rehab. This is week 4 of it. We've talked about what it means to be a friend. We've talked about what it means to have success in the single life. Last week we talked about marriage. And so if you've missed any of those 3, they're on our webpage at thevineonline.com. You can just go under media. And the 3 of those messages are there if you want to watch those or even pass those on to somebody you may know. But today we're in week 4. Next week we're going to wrap the series up. But today we're going to talk about the power of a parent. The power of a parent. The one thing that I know about all of us, and we're not all parents in this room, but all of us have parents, right? And so at the very beginning, all of us can sort of just say to us, all right, we had parents, and we may have had some really good parents. It may have been that maybe we didn't have the best parents. Could have been that maybe some parents that we had built us up and did great things for us, and maybe some parents didn't. And a lot of times we find out in our adult life that a lot of what we deal with, or a lot of what we bring into adulthood, is stuff that was sort of formulated, maybe not cemented, but formulated when we were a child or an early teenager. Usually by the time we're in high school, a lot of these things that we are talk about today have already been formulated, and by then it's too late to wait till your kid gets in high school and they go, all right, now I'm going to be a good parent. It's too late then to just necessarily start that process then, but we need to start that process as early as possible. In our church today, we have so many of you that have little children. I mean, our nursery is busting out. Our toddlers and our preschool is busting out. And so my encouragement for you today is to begin now. Even before your children can speak, begin the process now of some of the things that we're going to talk about, some of the principles we're going to lay out, some of the things we're going to talk about today. Paul David Tripp, I don't know if any of you ever read him or his blog, but he's just come out with a new book. And here's what he says in his new book. The new book is called Parenting 14 Gospel Principles That Can Radically Change Your Family. Here's what he says. He says, nothing is more important in your life than being one of God's tools to form a human soul. Nothing is more important in your life than being one of God's tools to help form a human soul. It's a very powerful quote. It's an even more powerful thought, because parenting is a lot more than Nike and American Eagle. It's a lot more than brand name this or brand name that. It's a lot more than athletics or academics. I know sometimes as a parent we think, no, those are our two goals, is to make them a good student, get straight A's, or to make them a really good athlete. But no, it's a whole lot more than that. It's a whole lot more than prom or homecoming. It's a lot more important than prom or homecoming. Because you see, you and I as parents, those of you who are parents and those of you who will one day be parents, we have a responsibility, we have a role, we have an opportunity to be a tool of God, to be used by God to help shape the human soul of our children. It's a lot more than something that is so temporary as 4 years of high school or 4 years of college. It is something that is shaping eternity. See, here's what I know. I know that all of our children that were born sinners. I know it's hard for you to hear, but they were. And you may say, well, I haven't seen that. You will. Don't worry. You will. They were all born as sinners. You know what? Just like mom and dad. Just like mom and dad. And then they were created by the creator of the universe. In fact, Psalms tells us that while that little baby was in the mother's womb, that God was knitting them together. God was making them unique and individual to themselves. God was putting together their DNA. I used to always say DNA should be spelled G-O-D, because it's God who knits them together in the mother's womb. And God is the one who desires to reconcile those souls back to himself. That's why he sent his son Jesus Christ to die on the cross for our children's sins and for our sins. All because he wants to reconcile us back to himself. And he wants to use you as a parent, as a tool, as an instrument of God in that process of bringing them back to him. Now, I want to give you this morning 3 guarantees, and then I want to call you to 3 commitments or 3 goals. Here's the first guarantee I will give you. Your child will care more about what you do than what you say. They will. Now, what happens is when they're small, we can trick them with our words, right? Like when it's bedtime, we just sort of use some clever words. Let's go read a story. In your mind, you're going, it's bedtime, but you know if you tell your kid it's bedtime, they're going to throw a fit. So you trick them with your words. But as they grow and as they get older, they get smart enough to begin to connect the dots, not so much in what you are saying, but they connect the dots to what they see happening in your life and in their life. Let me give you a couple of examples. Here's something a parent would say. Your education is important. And in fact, many of you would say your education is the most important thing in your life. But now many of you are teachers. How many of you have heard a kid say, well, I didn't get my homework done because I was at ball practice, dance, cheer, piano, and I was just out in the backyard playing? We tell them that education is important, and then we sign them up for all these activities that don't let them get their homework done. Here's one a parent would say to their kid, it's not all about money. But the child watches and they see a wallet full of credit cards. They hear the phone calls that come from the bill collectors. They see the stress between maybe mom and dad, or the stress on a parent when the bills come in every month. They see new things in their driveway or in their garage or in their house that they know they can't afford. They begin to connect the dots that you're telling me money is not important, and yet it looks like to you money is very important. Here's the third thing. Parent would say, God is important to our family. God is important to our family. And yet your child may say, well, at the most I have 5 minutes a day to do my quiet time. And if I want to read my Bible, I have to do it on an app because I'm so busy running from activity to activity that I just have to read the Bible on an app. And in fact, I know that my weekend I'm going to be so busy, and on Sunday I'm going to be so tired that we'll just sleep in today. You see, our children begin to watch, and when they're little, yes, we can fool them. But as they grow up, they begin to notice when what we do does not match what we say. And as they get older, and I'm just going to tell you, because I have 2 college students right now, as they get older, they'll begin to question you about all of those things. It won't just be, oh, okay. It's going to be, well, why? Explain. And so we need to understand that. Here's the second guarantee I'll give you. Your child will imitate what they see in you. Your child will imitate what they see in you. Most of our kids like the teams we like, right? There's a reason that Austin and Blake like Carolina basketball. I mean, they like basketball in general because when they were little, even before they were good at it, when I could dominate them, we would be out in the driveway playing basketball. And we did that. We played a lot of basketball up until it got to where I couldn't beat them anymore. Now we don't play as much, but we spent a lot of time just out in the driveway playing basketball. We spent a lot of time going to a gym on a basketball team, and I coached Austin one year. He probably says it's the worst year he ever had in basketball because his dad was the coach. But we shared a lot of that together, so that became a value of theirs. Was they began, out of all the sports they could have chosen, they began to choose basketball. And of all the games that we watched the Carolina basketball games, and all the games we've ever gone to, they've been Carolina basketball games. And so they begin to imitate what they have seen in me. When they see me yelling at the TV at a bad play or getting excited about a good play, they begin to imitate what they see. You're not going to let your kid, I guess I could direct this at a lot of you, but Bobby's not going to let his kid wear Auburn stuff in his house, are you, Bobby? No way. And at the same time, there's no way that the Brantleys are going to buy their cute little granddaughter a bulldog for Christmas, right? Not going to happen. They may buy her a tiger or an eagle, but they're not buying her a bulldog. Why? Because that's the values that they have, and our children will imitate and absorb the values that we have. Your children will absorb how you treat, for guys, how you treat ladies. Your children will absorb how you treat other people. Your children will absorb simple things like opening the door for somebody. Your children will watch, and as they grow, they will absorb the values that you have. They're going to absorb how you handle money. They're going to absorb character issues like integrity and honesty. They're going to absorb the kind of things in your life like discipline and character. They're going to watch your life, and they're going to absorb the idea, the concept of forgiveness and of godliness. They're going to watch your life and understand the idea and adopt the values of grace and mercy based on what they're seeing in our lives as their parents. It's a heavy responsibility of being a parent, but it is one that is, as many will know and testify to, is tremendously rewarding. The third guarantee is this: your child will shape their view of God through what they see in your life. Maybe you've heard this, but many times the first impression a child has of God is based off of their father. So if dad's a holler and a screamer and a hard disciplinarian, then their first view of God becomes he's up in heaven waiting for me to mess up because he's ready to discipline me. Or maybe it's just the opposite. Maybe they see their dad as just sort of this laid-back, chill guy that just lets you get away with anything, and then their mind becomes early on is their idea of God is he's just up in heaven, he's chill, he's laid back, and I can just do whatever I want to. Their early formulations of who God is based off of what they see in their earthly father. Most people come up with one of four views of God. The first one is this: some see him as a judge. Some see him as a judge. He's just up in heaven, watching, waiting for me to mess up so he can slam the gavel and punish me. That's how some people view God. Some people view God not as a judge, but as a grandfather. He's old, he's got a long gray beard, and he's up in heaven, and he's just laid back because granddaddies will give in to anything, right? I mean, granddaddies are softies. Granddaddies will go buy that toy truck that your mom told you couldn't have, your dad told you couldn't have, but your granddaddy will go buy it for you. Granddaddies are softies, and sometimes people have a view of God that way. The third one is this view of conditional love. If you act right, you'll get right. And a lot of people view God that, hey, if I act appropriately, then I'll get good things in return from him. If I act right, but it's all conditional on how I act, not on who God is. And then the fourth view of God, which is actually the accurate view of God, is the idea of unconditional love. God does judge and God does punish. All you have to do is read the Old Testament. But he doesn't do it wantingly, and he doesn't want to do it to us, but sometimes for our own good, he will pull back the reins. For our own good, he will discipline us. But at the same time, even when he's disciplining us, he loves us. The difference in conditional love and unconditional love is this. There's nothing we can ever do that would make God love us less, because it's based on who he is, not on who we are. Conditional love is flip-flop of all of that. Conditional love says, because of who you are and how good you act, I will show you love. And so a lot of times our children, as they're growing up, their first view of God, their first mental picture of God is based off of what they see in their father, what they see in their parents. And so those are 3 guarantees I can give you. And as a parent, I really don't like preaching about parenting, because I really feel like I'm one of those guys, maybe you've talked to people that have said, I wouldn't go back and change anything about my life. I can tell you, I would go back and change a lot about my life. I mean, if I could go back 19 years, almost 20 years, and start again, I would. Not because I think I've been a horrible parent, not because I think I've done, just been lousy at everything, but some of those little things I wish I could go back and change over the last 20 years of being a parent. And the reality is, when we become parents, we think we know it all. We realize very quickly we know nothing. And then it becomes a learning process for us along the way. And our children are our students, and we're the teachers, and we're trying to learn how to be a parent. And so today I want to give you I want to challenge you with 3 commitments. 3 goals, if you will. If you're here today and you're a parent, I want to challenge you with 3 goals or 3 commitments, however you may want to say that. Here they are. The first one is, will you train up your child in the way they should go? Will you train up a child in the way they should go? Proverbs 22:6 says this. It says, direct your children on the right path, and when they are older, they will not leave it. Now, this passage and a couple others that we're going to read comes out of the book of Proverbs. You may know that the book of Proverbs is called a book of wisdom, and all throughout it, from chapter 1, verse 1, all the way through chapter 31, all these verses are about wisdom. Well, what's going to be the wise thing to do? What's going to be the wise thing for us to do? And as parents, it's saying one of the wise things that we need to do is direct our children onto the right path. Now, you need to understand that the right path here has nothing to do with education. It has nothing to do with athletics. The right path of wisdom that they're talking about here has nothing to do with UNC versus Duke. And by the way, college basketball practice has started. So you'll hear a lot more references in my messages. It has nothing to do with old math, new math. It has nothing to do with clothing. It has nothing to do with all that. The path that it's talking about, the right path, is the path of righteousness. The path of their soul, the path that is determining their eternity, the path that is leading their life. One commentary said that we should train them up not in the way they would go, but in the way that they should go. I know that for me, many times when I would be talking to Austin and Blake, whether it was I was having to discipline them about something, or whether it was just a life lesson that we were trying to learn from or deal with, that I would always tell them, my responsibility is to teach you and train you so that one day you will be a responsible adult. Because the truth of the matter that's coming real close in my life real fast is one day they're going to be out on their own. And the phrase that we have right now that we're going through at my house is, there will come a day when you won't have to ask my opinion or care what I think or care what I would say that you should do, but that day is not today. But that day is coming. That day's coming when Austin and Blake will be out on their own. They'll probably have their own kids. I'll be that grandfather that will go and buy the toy truck that they told them they couldn't have. I will be that granddaddy that will just hug them and love them and say, yeah, come here, let me give you $1. I mean, I will be that granddad one day. But you see, if I hope for those days to be joyous and exciting and caring, it's going to take a son that is a responsible adult. And so part of our job now as parents is to train them up with the understanding and knowledge that one day they will be on their own. One day they will be making their own decisions. One day they will be paying their own consequences in their life. So will you commit to train your child up in the way they should go? Here's the second thing. Will you discipline them correctly when needed? Will you discipline them correctly when needed? You see, discipline is a biblical concept. Discipline is something that is spoken of all throughout the Scriptures. But many of us have a skewed version of discipline. In fact, for some of you, just then when I said discipline, you had one mental picture of what discipline was. For most of us, when we hear the word discipline, we literally think spanking. That's just what we think. In fact, when I said that, some of you went back to those days when you were being disciplined, right? Some of you thought about those disciplines. Well, discipline is a whole lot more than a spanking. Discipline is the idea of correcting, of reproof of something, of a behavior, an attitude, of teaching in the moment. In fact, I would say this. I've thought a lot about this week how to say this, but I would say this. If you ever are going to spank your kid, it needs to begin with a conversation and it needs to end with a conversation. See, one of the worst things that we do as parents is we just run straight to the spanking part, and we haven't explained to them why they're getting the spanking, what they did wrong, whatever. We just, please, whatever you do after this message, do not go ask Austin and Blake. Okay? I'm trying to tell you, I have messed up more times than I've got it right probably. But what I'm trying to tell you today is that there is a need for discipline in our children's life. And if you don't discipline your children, then when they are adults, they will be undisciplined adults. And undisciplined adults make tragic, horrible decisions that come with many times life consequences that cannot be changed. Unfortunately, many have taken the idea of discipline or the idea of even spanking, and they've perverted it and twisted it. It's become a form of abuse. Maybe you're here today and you know that. You felt that abuse. And I'm just here to say to you today, I'm sorry for that. And God loves you. And God cares for you. And so even in that pain that you may have from the past, you need to know that God is there for you. There's a part of discipline that our children need to be. Listen to these verses in Proverbs. Again, the book of wisdom. Proverbs 13:24. Those who spare the rod of discipline hate their children. Now, I don't think anybody in here would say, I hate my children. I know most of you pretty well. I don't think there's anybody who's going to say, I hate my children, but the Scripture says that those who spare the rod of discipline hate their children. Those who love their children care enough to discipline them. Proverbs 29:15 says, to discipline a child produces wisdom, but a mother is disgraced by an undisciplined child. I have been in ministry long enough and have dealt with enough mothers who have this undisciplined child out there. And I've seen their tears and I've heard their prayers and I've heard them at times even begging God. I mean, not even asking, begging God to bring their child back. Verse 17 of 29 says, discipline your children, and they will give you peace of mind and will make your heart glad. I boiled all those verses up in this to the parents. A little work on the front end saves a lot of work on the back end. And a little work on the back end saves a lot of pain in the end. And I know sometimes we think, oh, but they're just perfect. I'm just here to tell you they're not. They're just angels. No, not really. And the problem that we make as parents is we just say, oh, just don't, that was so innocent. That was just so, don't worry about that. And then the next thing you know, they're 13. And all that stuff that you didn't worry about starts coming out at you at 13. And then at 16, when they get their keys, it's like you can't even get a word in anymore. Because it's like, see ya, gone, got this to do, got to be there. Folks, it takes a little work on the front end, and it'll save a lot of work on their back ends. And if you'll do a little work on the back end, it'll save you a lot of pain in the end. Here's the third thing I want to encourage you to do as a parent. Will you encourage your child to greatness? Will you encourage your child to greatness? Now, see, I love that because I can ask that question and all of you go, certainly. Certainly. But listen to these verses. In Ephesians chapter 6, it says, fathers, do not provoke your children to anger by the way that you treat them. Rather, bring them up with the discipline and instruction that comes from the Lord. Do not provoke your children to anger. Listen to Colossians 3:21. Fathers, do not aggravate your children, or they will become discouraged. Now, I've heard both of those verses put together, and they've taken that word provoke, and they've taken that word aggravate, and I've heard a lot of them say, do not exasperate your children. And I got to be honest with you, when I heard that, I didn't know what exasperate meant. So I did some digging, and basically what it means is, many times as a parent, we set our children up for failure. And when we set our children up for failure, it's going to discourage them. When we set them up for failure, it's going to aggravate them. When we set them up for failure, it would be like taking our 6-year-old and throw him in the middle school and say, go, you can do it, son. You can handle all that math. You can handle all those classes. You can carry all those books. Come on, you're 6. Come on, you can do it. I mean, unless your name's Doogie Howser, you're not going to make it. And many times we exasperate our children. I made a list of ways that we exasperate our children. One of the ways is we make our children deal with adult issues that are not age appropriate. We make our children deal with adult issues that are not. Our children deal with money issues. Our children deal with job stress. I mean, dad comes home stressed out from work, and where does he vent it at? Where does it get out at? It gets out on our children and exasperate them. They see marital stress. And basically what happens is our children end up dealing with adult issues that they were never meant to deal with. Here's another way we exasperate our children. Little to no verbal communication. It's so easy nowadays, and I know many of us as parents may think our kids like it. Like, right, leave them alone with the Xbox, leave them alone with the video game. But in the end, that is not what they want. In the end, your child will want communication with you. I can honestly say that one of the best parts of my life right now, one of the best stages of my life right now, is when me and Austin and Blake can sit together and watch TV together or watch a game together. And we have adult conversations, because they're adults now. We have adult conversations about the game. We have adult conversations about the movie we're watching or whatever it is. One of the ways we exasperate our children is we don't communicate with them. We just think, leave them off in that room watching the TV or playing the game, and they'll love that. But in the end, they don't. Another way that we exasperate our kids is by poorly drawn, or I use the word floating boundaries. Your children may act like they don't want boundaries. In fact, they may be so young they don't even understand what a boundary is. But boundaries provide security for our children. When we have a yard and you live on a street, there's a reason you tell your kid, don't go out into the street. You can stay in the yard. The yard is safe. The yard is a great boundary. Stay there. Play with the dog. Do whatever. But do not go over the curb into the street, because why? There's danger there. Well, how would we be as a parent if we just said, yeah, just go outside and do whatever you want to? I was coming home the other night at about 9:30, 10 o'clock on a school night, and walking through our neighborhood was this gang of like middle school guys. And I almost wanted to stop and ask, like, do your parents know where you're at? It's 10 o'clock at night, it's a school night, and you guys are just moseying through the neighborhood. We have to have some boundaries for our children. They do not need to be floating boundaries. Here's another one. We focus on the negative instead of the positive. We focus on the negative instead of the positive. Now, I'm just going to use an example. This is very hypothetical. I know report cards for many went out this week. Let's say your kid came home with 2 A's, a B, and a C. Did you talk more about the 2 A's, the B, or the C? I'm just going to tell you as a parent, you know what I talked about? We've got to get that C up. I don't know what's wrong with that C. Why you got a C? We got to get that C up. See, that exasperates our children. They may have worked just as hard, if not harder, for that C in that particular class than they did the A's that they got. But at the same time, we exasperate them by focusing on the negative instead of the positive. We focus on the shots they missed instead of the shots that they made. We focus on the times they struck out instead of the hits that they got. We focus on the negative instead of the positive. Here's another way we exasperate our kids. We treat our kids like an adults, and the adults act like kids. And we exasperate our children when we treat them like adults, and then at the same time, the adults, the parents, act like kids. And then here's another way that we exasperate our children, that we frustrate them, that we aggravate them, is we teach them about justice, but we don't teach them about grace. We teach them about justice, and there's a place for justice in the parenting relationship. We teach them about justice, but we don't teach them about grace. And one of the reasons that their view of God gets skewed is because all they've ever known as a child was about justice, 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 justice. They never understood the concept of grace because they never saw it exhibited to them. They didn't understand the idea of mercy because they never saw it played out in their home. All they ever knew was justice, 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 justice. And when we live a life that way as parents, we exasperate our children. We aggravate them. We provoke them to anger. So I flipped the script for just a second. And so what can we do to encourage our children? Well, here's the first thing is, don't make them deal with adult issues. Your child is a child. They need to deal with children issues. Matching socks, clean underwear, those kinds of things. Those are kid issues. They need to focus on that. They do not need to be worried about the adult issues that may be going on between mom and dad, or between dad and his job, or mom and her job. They don't need to be stressed out. That doesn't need to be brought on them. Another way is communicate with them a lot. Talk to them regularly. Talk to them. How was your day? And I know a lot of the time your kids are so small now, if you say, how was your day? You get the answer, good. And all that entails is they colored the picture, and they, didn't mess their britches, and they got to play on the playground. I mean, that was what happened today. It was good. I'm just here to tell you, you begin that process when they're small, and when they get older and the conversations get far more sophisticated and the answers become a lot more complicated, you will have built a base of communication with your children. What else? Clearly drawn boundaries. As a parent, you have the responsibility and the opportunity of drawing the boundaries for your kids. You get to decide the bedtime. They don't. You get to decide what time will be best for them to get in bed to be rested for school the next day. And so you need to draw clear boundaries for them. Here's another one. You focus on the positive and deal with the negative. I'm not saying that we don't deal with the negative.